Thanks for joining us today. Good afternoon. My name is Winnie Young, and I'm a third-year PhD student in McGill Sociology Department. Today, I'm going to be presenting you some preliminary results of my research project, Marriage Equality or Socioeconomic Inequality, exploring same-sex marriage formation in Canada between 2006 and 2016. Now, regarding this tentative project title, which I decided a long time ago, I recently realized that it's actually a little bit misleading. As for the reason why it is misleading, I will reveal this later, so please bear with me right now. Okay, so to provide you with some warrants of the research, aka why does it matter? So marriage is central to the increase of union formation and social inequalities because it is associated with a wide variety of economic, social, and legal benefits. Therefore, broadly speaking, it concerns issues regarding cumulative disadvantage, social reproduction, and processes of social exclusion. But why do we study same-sex marriage specifically? So first, we can reassess theories and hypotheses regarding marriage that are largely based on heteronormative assumptions. And also, it demands researchers and policymakers to reformulate policies facilitating the well-being of same-sex families. And finally, it furthers our empirical understandings in alternative family forms. But how do we study issues regarding marriage then? So many have argued that the question of who marries cannot be disentangled from the questions of who marries whom, because the chance of meeting potential partners, the selection from a pool of candidates, and the decision to partner up are all crucial aspects of marriage. So basically it takes two to tango, or at least two anyway. So economists and many demographers use the term assortative mating to study the question of who marries whom. So, for example, positive assortative mating or homogamy occurs when we partner with someone who's more similar to ourselves than would be expected by chance. And the opposite is called negative assortative mating or heterogamy. So from now on, I'm going to be using these terminologies a lot to sound more professional, but basically they are very simple ideas. So with this understanding, we ask again, what kind of couples are more likely to be married? So over the past few decades, a ton of empirical studies based on different sex couples have already suggested that there's an increasing socioeconomic divide in marriage rates, in that the educated and the wealthier are more likely to be married, and they're more likely to be married to people who are equally educated and rich. But we simply don't know if this is also the case for same-sex couples because we didn't have enough data on same-sex couples. But now we do, because Canada offers a great opportunity to study this issue given its relatively longer history of recognizing same-sex marriage since the 2005 Civil Marriage Act. Okay, so my research questions are, first of all, are same-sex couples with homogamous labor market characteristics more likely to be married as opposed to being in common law cohabitation? And secondly, are same-sex couples with better economic standings more likely to be married as opposed to being in common law cohabitation? So my overall objective is to provide an up-to-date empirical overview of comparisons between married and cohabiting same-sex couples over the first decade of federal level legalization of same-sex marriage in Canada. Okay, so there are three major hypotheses predicting assortative mating in labor market trades across union types. So the first specialization model, it suggests that the husband and the wife engage in specialization between paid work and domestic labor to maximize the joint utility of the household. So marriage facilitates specialization because marriage contract is enforceable, and also it provides insurance against massive loss of their investments in the event of dissolution. Conversely, cohabiting couples don't really have this kind of institutional benefits or protections, so they're less inclined to specialize, and they're more likely to be independent and egalitarian in terms of their labor market arrangement. So this theory predicts homogamy in cohabitation and heterogamy in marriage. Now, in terms of the double selection hypothesis, it suggests that when individuals go through the process of singlehood to cohabitation and from cohabitation to marriage, they're actually screening out poor matches. So the premise is that marriage requires better matches to ensure shared lifestyles and cultural values. But for cohabitants, since they're still testing water, they're more accepting of the idea of partnering with people who are more different from themselves. And so heterogamy in cohabitation and homogamy in marriage, which is the opposite of what the specialization thesis predicts. Now, the uncertainty hypothesis is very similar to the double selection hypothesis, but it also emphasizes not only homogamy in labor market traits, but also economic maturity for marriage. The idea is that both equal economic standings between partners and strong labor market positions of partners are very important too. So it suggests that uncertain employment prospects delay couples from entering marriage. In other words, homogamy and good economic standings for marriage. So the data I'll be using is Canadian long-form census data, pulling 3 waves together from 2006, 2011, and 2016. Now, census data have many advantages, including the size, representativeness, quality, and more importantly, they provide couple data. And so in terms of my samples, I selected individuals who were 25 years or older at a given census year because they were more likely to have completed tertiary education if they did receive tertiary education. At the same time, I selected those who were either in same-sex cohabiting union or same-sex marital unions. So after excluding those aged under 25, and different sex unions, the weighted number of observation are around 92,000 and around 78,000 male and female couples respectively. In terms of my methods, I performed a set of multivariate logistic regressions with the binary outcome variable of whether married or cohabiting. And all independent variables are coded as couple level variables. So given the time constraint, I can't really get into the details of my codings and stuff, but I'm going to briefly talk about what variables I included. So census year, obviously, and also the gender of the couple, the age group of the younger partner, age difference between partner, census metropolitan areas, whether living in Quebec or not, whether living with at least 1 child or not, race and ethnicity matching, and generational status matching. And in terms of my focal variables, labor market traits, first of all, I included educational matching. So education signals one's earning potential and one's values, tastes, and cultural resources. And I recoded them into 3 groups. So neither partners have BA degrees or above, only one has a BA degree or above, and both have BA degrees or above. Now, employment status matching. So I recorded them into 3 groups. So dual earner couples, single earner couples, and unemployed couples. Now for both joint income and income difference, they are both log transformed continuous variables. So joint income indicates the combined annual incomes of both partners. And we see that there's some gender difference here. So for male couples, cohabiting couples generally have higher joint income compared to married couples, but this is not the case for female couples. And for income difference, it indicates the absolute value difference between partners' income. So for both male and female couples, cohabiting couples generally have lower income disparity within the household. Okay, now before I get into the results, I need to put out some disclaimers and caveats and limitations to tell you what I'm trying to do and what I'm not trying to do. So despite many advantages of census data, they're still very much cross-sectional. So this means we only know the current conjugal status of couples, but we don't have information on relationship history and duration or history of labor market activities. For example, for employment and income, we don't know if they precede the current conjugal status or not, and they may very well change after cohabitation and marriage. So back to the point of my misleading project title, which I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation. So what I'm trying to do is to compare the labor market traits matchings between cohabiting and marriage couples, but I'm not trying to trace marriage formation of same-sex couples or to make any causal claims on what leads to marriage. So that's important to bear in mind. well, I need to bear in mind anyway. Okay, so the second limitation is that the data include only those who are coupled, so we don't have information on those who are single but self-identify as gay or lesbians, or those who are in partnerships but are not living together with their partners. So the results cannot be extended to those individuals. And finally, we can't really identify bisexual, trans-identified, or non-binary individuals because the questions are not asked. And finally, the last disclaimer I have to make is that due to this unexpected lockdown, I wasn't able to get as much released as possible. For example, I was also supposed to compare female and male models, but not models, couples, but I haven't run these models yet. And so the results will be very preliminary and the conclusions inconclusive. So given this situation, I very much welcome, and in fact, I'm desperate for any suggestions, critiques, or recommendations on how I can probably overcome some of the shortcomings or carry out my research in the future. Okay, so finally, we're at the result part. So as mentioned, I didn't run the regressions based on gender of the couples. So here, what you're seeing is a result based on all couples while controlling for gender. And here, this is a truncated table showing only the labor market traits and also the census year. So unsurprisingly, in recent years, couples are increasingly more likely to be married compared to 2006. And also in terms of the labor market trade. So in terms of educational matching, we see that highly educated homogamous couples are the most likely to be married compared to those the least educated homogamous couples. And in terms of employment status matching, we see that unemployed couples are the most likely to be married and followed by single earner couples, and dual earner couples are the least likely to be married. In terms of joint income and joint income difference, the higher the joint income, the less likely the couple is married, and the higher the income difference, the more likely the couple is married. Okay, so as mentioned previously, the uncertainty hypothesis emphasizes the role of economic maturity and equal financial standing of partners. So joint income and income difference are especially important factors here. So to investigate this issue further, I include interaction terms between education and joint income and education and income difference. So we see that for joint income, it doesn't really moderate the relationship between education matching and marriage because it's not significant here. But for log income difference, then we see that for educationally heterogamous couples, an additional increase in income difference is associated with the largest increase in the likelihood of being married. Now, for Model 3, following the same logic, we examine the interaction between employment matching and joint income and employment matching and income difference. So I converted this table into predicted probabilities so it's easier to understand. And I didn't do this for education matching because the result is largely insignificant. So looking at the first interaction term here, so this dark blue means joint income in the 10th percentile, and this means at the mean level, and this means joint income in the 90th percentile, so basically rich couples. So we can see that overall, for every single group, over the decade, the probability of being married increased over time. And also, we see that for income, as mentioned before, it is associated with decrease in the likelihood of being married. So we see this negative slope here. And for dual earner couples, they're the least likely to be married, but for unemployed couples, they are the most likely to be married. Now, if we look closely, we see that for unemployed couples, specifically, an increase in joint income is associated with the largest decrease in the likelihood of being married. So the slope is steeper here compared to the other two groups. Now, turning to the second interaction term, we see that income difference is associated with increase in the likelihood of being married. But for single earner couples specifically, an increase in income difference is associated with the largest increase in the likelihood of being married because the slope is steeper here. And compared to dual earner couples, but this group is not statistically significant. So what does this all mean? So it's been quite chaotic, but I'm going to try to summarize the findings. So if we look at only educational matching itself alone, then we see that the result is actually more consistent with the double selection hypothesis. But if we look at interaction terms between income difference and educational matching, income difference and employment matching, then we will see that for heterogamous couples, an additional increase in income difference is associated with the largest increase in the likelihood of being married. So this is actually more aligned with the specialization thesis. Now, if we look at employment status matching alone, then we see that unemployed couples are the most likely to be married, but dual earner couples are the least likely to be married. Now, in terms of interpretation, this is a little bit tricky here, because if the employment arrangement took place before marriage and lasted into marriage, then perhaps getting married is a way to gain insurance for couples who are both unemployed. Meanwhile, cohabiting couples are more equal and independent in their labor market arrangements. So this would be more in line with the specialization thesis. However, if the employment arrangement took place after marriage and cohabitation, then maybe those cohabiting couples are dual earners because they feel the need to gain financial stability and maturity in order to get married. And so this is more aligned with the uncertainty hypothesis. So here it is a little bit ambiguous, but in terms of interaction terms, between income and employment status matching, then we see that it seems like those who are both unemployed and with low income are the most likely to be married. So this again supports the specialization thesis. So all things considered, I would say with a great deal of caution, of course, the specialization thesis seems to hold water, and there is little evidence suggesting any association between socioeconomic advantages and marriage as we observe among different sex couples. And if anything, maybe the opposite is true for same-sex couples. So that's my presentation, and I acknowledge the resources and fundings from CIQSS and CRDCN, and I appreciate the help from my advisors, and thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Okay, can everyone hear me? No?
Yes.
Yes, okay, should we take a few questions before we move on to Cecilia's presentation? I saw that Benoit had a few questions in the chat area.
Okay.
I think we have 10 minutes and then we could move to Cecilia's presentation.
Okay.
Benoit, est-ce que tu veux poser des questions, Benoit?
So I'm just gonna read the, and thanks for accommodating me in terms of my zero French proficiency. So I would also show cross-sectional results could also be interesting to run QC Quebec and ROC separately if sample size allow. Income endogenous. Okay, I am not exactly sure what this means, but I am guessing this is probably related to what I talked about before in terms of we don't know whether employment status and income information preceded the conjugal status, the current conjugal status or not. So we don't know if actually it's this income or employment status that leads to marriage, or is it actually happening after marriage? And also income is obviously highly correlated with employment status. So I'm guessing that's what endogeneity means here in terms of income. And so that's why I'm not trying to really suggest that a higher income will necessarily lead to marriage, but it is interesting to see that actually those with lower income in general are actually the more likely to be married. And I will actually explore this issue further with my qualitative interviews, which is also a part of my project. But for the quantitative part, I can't really answer this question very precisely. And also in terms of cross-sectional results, I was gonna say that apart from comparing female and male couples, I'm also going to break down my results based on census year, so from 2006, 2011, and 2016, because it's very likely that the profiles of people who married during these years are different.
Yeah, that was my sense, was it would be interesting to look more at that shift over time. That my takeaway from this presentation is that when there's a gap between the income, that marriage is more likely, and it seems like, if I understood correctly, it's like a protection for the partner who's making less money. And then that's increasing over time, and perhaps because marriage as a typical option is becoming more and more common in same-sex community.
Sorry, also in terms of QC, I'm guessing it means Quebec here.
Yes.
In terms of province, also I was going to mention that, sorry, because of the time constraint, I didn't really include everything, but I was also going to think more about provincial variation, especially because actually for British Columbia and Quebec and Ontario, they actually legalized same-sex marriage a little bit, like 2 years before 2005, and so they're earlier. And also we understand that Quebec has very different everything compared to English Canada. So it is definitely worth investigating in terms of more detailed provincial differences. So maybe I will be using multi-level modeling in the future instead of just this one level thing comparing Quebec and the rest of Canada. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
Do you have a sense of what the gender differences might end up being?
It's interesting because apart from the income difference, which I talked about before, for cohabiting couples, male cohabiting couples, they actually have higher income compared to compared to married couples, but this is not the same as female couples. And also, so that's one thing that's interesting, but at the same time, it seems like it's different throughout the decade. So when I did actually run separate models based on different years, but I didn't get the results released, so I can't say with any confidence, but I did see some difference. So it is wiser to kind of break down the years, yes.